Arthur Vance's Italian leather briefcase, an item that cost more than the annual salary of many of his employees, slipped from his trembling fingers. It didn't just fall. It collided with the Carrara marble floor of the foyer with a dull, heavy, and final thud, echoing through the high white walls of the mansion like the sound of a judge's gavel sentencing the end of order. Arthur didn't even blink. He stood paralyzed in the doorway, the cold Saturday rain soaking the back of his designer shirt, unable to take a step forward. His eyes, accustomed to analyzing complex spreadsheets and finding microscopic errors in multi-million-dollar merger contracts, refused to process the grotesque image unfolding before him. That was not his living room. That white, sterile, germ-free sanctuary, climate-controlled at a constant and precise 72 degrees Fahrenheit, which he had spent fortunes to maintain as a glass dome against the chaos of the outside world, had simply disappeared. In its place was a war zone, an apocalypse of filth. In the corner of the room, near the Steinway grand piano that no one had played in exactly 3 years, a huge black plastic tarp was crumpled and tossed aside, useless, like a white flag of surrender covered in mud. But the tarp had failed. The center of the room was taken over by dirt, not just dust, but black, damp, living earth, full of roots and stones, that had overflowed from whatever the initial barrier was, and spread mercilessly across the beige Persian rugs. These were antique rugs with a delicate weave that were now drinking dark, muddy water like thirsty sponges. There were puddles of black water reflecting the light from the Swarovski crystal chandelier, creating a distorted, ugly, and dirty image of the surrounding wealth. Small handprints and bare footprints drew trails of mud across the polished floor, violating the integrity of that sacred space. The smell was the worst part. A thick scent of rain, wet grass, and organic life invading the aseptic environment that usually smelled of cleaning chemicals. And in the middle of that destruction, sitting on the floor as if they were in the eye of a hurricane, were Maya and Sophie. What? Arthur's voice failed, choked by a toxic mix of disbelief, panic, and a cold fury that climbed his spine vertebra by vertebra. He felt the blood pumping in his ears, a high-pitched buzzing that drowned out the sound of the rain outside. He took a deep breath, swallowing the damp, earthy air, tasting the dirt on his tongue. He tried again, and this time his voice came out like thunder. "What on earth is happening here?" Maya jumped to her feet. She was unrecognizable. Her brown hair, usually tied in a loose bun, was stuck to her face with mud. Her denim overalls weighed pounds from the water and clay, dripping onto the floor. Her hands were shaking, not from fear of him, but from the adrenaline rush of someone who had just fought an invisible, desperate war. Her sudden movement as she stood up scattered even more splashes of thick mud, which flew in slow motion and landed on Arthur's favorite beige velvet armchair, the only chair where he allowed himself to sit and read at night. Arthur watched the stain form. He saw the fabric fiber absorb the dirt. He saw the microbes multiplying, the disorder crawling toward his daughter like a contagious disease. "Mr. Vance, please, listen to me. It's not what it looks like," Maya said, gasping for breath, taking a step forward with her hands raised in surrender, her dark palms dripping black water onto the immaculate floor. The tarp slipped. The floor was slippery. We tried to contain it, I swear on my life, but she was panicking. It was the only way to bring her back. I had no choice. "Panic!" Arthur screamed, his voice exploding and making the double-pane windows vibrate in their frames. He lunged into the room, completely ignoring the fact that his own Italian leather shoes were being ruined by the puddle of mud. He crushed clumps of earth with a crunching sound that made him physically nauseous. "You call this panic? I call it vandalism. I call it sabotage. You've turned my house into a pigsty. You brought trash from the street into my sanctuary. Look at this. Look at my daughter." Sophie, who was sitting on the floor with her hands buried up to her wrists in a shapeless mound of clay, cringed. The 10-year-old girl, blind and fragile, seemed terrified by the violence in her father's voice, a tone she had never heard directed at her. Her face, usually pale and clean like a porcelain doll untouched on a high shelf, was smeared with dark earth like tribal war paint. Her expensive linen clothes, custom-made not to irritate her sensitive skin, were heavy, clinging to her thin body, soaked in dirty water. "Daddy?" Sophie whispered, turning her blind head frantically toward the sound. totally disoriented. Her hands trembled over the clay. "Are you mad? Did the fire stop? Did the smell of smoke go away?" "I'm not mad, Sophie. I am furious. I am devastated." Arthur ignored the strange, delirious question about the fire. He was blinded by the broken order, by the breach in security. Arthur looked at Sophie. His daughter was motionless, covered in mud, breathing too fast. For a moment, something inside him hesitated. This didn't look like vandalism. It looked like the aftermath. But fear spoke louder. He pointed a trembling finger at the open door, where the storm was blowing into the hall. "It's over, Maya. Pack your things. You're fired. Get out of my house right now before I call the police for destruction of private property and put you in jail for criminal negligence." "I'm not leaving, and leaving her like this on the floor," Maya fired back, blocking Arthur's path to the girl with her own body, showing a suicidal courage that no employee had ever dared to show Arthur Vance. "She just came out of a terrible crisis, Mr. Vance. She needs comfort, warmth, not screaming and threats. Can't you see she's shivering from the cold?" "You leave now, or you leave in handcuffs," Arthur roared, his voice so deep and threatening that Sophie began to cry convulsively, hugging her own dirty knees, smearing her face with her muddy hands. "You put my daughter at risk of infection. You exposed her to bacteria, fungi, glass that could be in that dirt. Out of my sight. Now." Maya looked into Arthur's eyes. She saw the vein pulsing in his forehead. She saw the deep fear hidden behind the mask of anger. But she saw that she couldn't win that battle there. Staying and screaming would only cause more trauma for Sophie. She backed away, defeated, her shoulders dropping under the weight of her wet clothes. She looked at Sophie one last time, her heart broken into 1,000 pieces. "I'm so sorry, little one. I tried to hold up the ceiling. I tried." Arthur, his breathing ragged, watched the nanny run to grab her battered canvas bag, tripping on the plastic tarp that had failed to protect the rug. He looked at the mess around him, feeling his chest tighten as if an iron hand were crushing his heart. He thought he was protecting his home. He thought he was protecting his daughter from the dirt, the diseases, and the unpredictable chaos of the world outside. But Arthur had no idea that by kicking out that mess and that woman, he was kicking out the only possible cure for the pain that had been consuming that family for 3 years. He had just kicked hope out the door, straight into the cold and merciless storm. Before we see the unfolding of this tragedy and the discovery on the security cameras that will make Arthur question his sanity and his love as a father, click the subscribe button. We bring emotional stories every day that teach us to see beyond appearances, and you need to see how this story ends. To understand why a little mud caused such a nuclear reaction in a grown, rational man, we need to go back in time. We need to understand the origin of the ice that covered Arthur's heart. We need to go back 3 years, to the day Arthur Vance's colorful world turned to ash, smoke, and eternal darkness. The Vance mansion wasn't always a silent mausoleum where even the dust was afraid to settle, and where laughter was forbidden. There was life in those walls. There was piano music on the weekends, played by Elena, who filled the house with the melodies of Chopin. There were garden parties with colorful balloons and barbecues, where neighbors complained about the noise. But Arthur didn't care. And there was Elena, Arthur's wife, the soul of the house, whose laughter filled the high hallways and made the cold marble feel warm and welcoming. Arthur was a different man back then. He didn't just wear gray suits. He would come home from work, loosen his tie, and roll in the grass with Sophie, staining his expensive clothes with chlorophyll without caring about the laundry. He was happy. But happiness is sometimes as fragile as thin glass, beautiful to look at, but easy to break. On a cold winter night, while the family slept safely in their beds, sheltered from the cold, a short circuit in the old wiring of a space heater downstairs started a silent and treacherous fire. The fire didn't start with an explosion, but with a spark. It climbed up the velvet curtains, fed on the varnish of the wooden walls, and entered the air conditioning vents, spreading toxic smoke throughout the house even before the first alarm went off. Arthur woke up coughing, with the taste of copper in his mouth. The acrid smell of burning plastic and wood filled his lungs, choking him. The alarm went off too late, a sharp and terrifying sound. He jumped out of bed, disoriented. The hallway was filled with thick, oily black smoke that made it impossible to see an inch in front of his face. The heat was unbearable, like opening the door to an industrial oven. "Elena! Sophie!" he shouted, but the smoke swallowed his voice. He crawled along the floor, where the air was a little more breathable. He managed to reach Sophie's room in time. He snatched the girl from her bed, wrapping her in a blanket, carrying her in his arms, shielding her face against his own chest as the flames licked the hallway walls like hungry tongues. But the flames were too fast for Elena. She was in the office on the other side of the house, trying to save the family documents and photo albums, the memories she valued more than life itself. The ceiling gave way before Arthur could go back. The sound of the wood cracking and falling was the sound of Arthur's heart breaking forever. And the intense heat, that hellish heat, stole something precious from Sophie. Although Arthur had protected her face from the direct flames, the inhalation of toxic smoke combined with the extreme air temperature irreversibly damaged her corneas and optic nerve before the firefighters could arrive with their hoses and sirens. Days later, in the hospital, the scene was a blinding white. Arthur sat in a hard plastic chair by his daughter's bed. The smell of antiseptic was sickening. Sophie, only 7 years old, had her eyes bandaged with white gauze. The doctor walked in, clipboard in hand and eyes downcast. That look doctors have when they bring bad news. Arthur heard the words as if they were coming from underwater, muffled by the ringing in his ears. Permanent damage. Hypoxia. Total blindness. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Vance." Arthur looked at his hands. They still had soot marks under the fingernails, marks he scrubbed every night, but they seemed tattooed into his skin. Guilt was a corrosive acid. "I am the engineer. I am the man of the house. I am the father. I am the protector, and I failed. I let the fire in. I let the monster in." In that moment, as the heart monitor beeped rhythmically, Arthur made a decision that would change everyone's fate. "Never again," he whispered to the sterile air of the intensive care unit, squeezing his daughter's small, limp hand so hard his knuckles turned white. "I will build a fortress, Sophie. Nothing dirty, nothing dangerous, nothing unpredictable will ever touch you again. Chaos took your mother and your eyes, but chaos will not take you. I will be your shield against the world." The guilt turned into a pathological obsession. In the following months, Arthur renovated the entire house. He spent millions. He eliminated steps to prevent tripping. He rounded all the corners of the furniture with thick rubber guards. He installed hospital-grade HEPA air filters that hummed softly 24 hours a day, filtering out any dust particles. He replaced the warm wood floors with slip-resistant, cold, and antibacterial materials. And he banned anything that couldn't be controlled. Sophie's life stopped being that of a child and became a rigorous medical schedule. The vibrant girl became a sad statue sitting in the dark of her room, afraid to take a step and get hurt, absorbing her father's fear like a dry sponge absorbs water. The house was safe. The house was clean. But the house was dead. Before Maya, there were others. Many others. The Vance mansion had become famous in the city's employment agencies, but for the wrong reasons. It was known as the meat grinder. No nanny lasted more than 2 weeks. A fortnight before the storm that would change everything, Arthur was sitting at the head of the long glass dining table, reviewing reports on his tablet while eating a flavorless grilled salmon. Mrs. Higgins, a 60-year-old British housekeeper, highly recommended and with royal references, entered the room. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a silver tray. "Mr. Vance," Mrs. Higgins said, her voice catching in her throat. "Little Sophie." There was a small incident in the upstairs hallway. Arthur stood up from the table immediately, his chair scraping the floor with a sharp squeal. The tablet was forgotten. "An incident? Is she hurt? Call the doctor." "No, sir, please calm down. She just tripped. There was a little water on the floor." Arthur stopped in his tracks, spinning on his heels, his eyes narrowed into icy slits. "Water? Where did the water come from, Mrs. Higgins?" I let her hold a glass of water, sir. She said she was thirsty and wanted to drink by herself, like a big girl. She spilled a little and slipped. But she's fine. She didn't even cry." "You let a blind girl walk alone with a glass of water on a polished marble floor?" Arthur asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. What if the glass was glass? What if it broke? What if she fell on the shards? Do you have any idea how long it takes for a femoral artery to be cut by a piece of glass? 3 minutes, Mrs. Higgins. 3 minutes to bleed to death. But, sir, it was a reinforced plastic cup and You put my daughter at unnecessary risk because you were too lazy to help her. Pack your things. You're dismissed. The driver will take you to the gate. I don't want you here in 10 minutes. Arthur fired the best housekeeper in the city over half a glass of spilled water. He was isolated. The agencies stopped taking his calls. It was in this desperation, in this vacuum of care, that the resume of Maya Rossi, which was at the bottom of the rejected pile due to lack of formal experience, was rescued. Maya arrived at the mansion on a gray Tuesday. The contrast was striking. The house was a symphony of whites, grays, and cold metals. Maya was an explosion of color. She wore mustard yellow overalls, a red scarf in her hair, and worn, hand-painted Converse sneakers. She brought with her the smell of oil paint and freedom. Arthur met her at the top of the stairs, looking down like a king judging a court jester. He immediately noticed the blue paint stain under her thumbnail. Filth, he thought. Sloppiness. I see everything, Ms. Rossi, Arthur said, without even saying, "Good morning." He gestured to the tablet in his hand. I am a man of detail. I have installed high-definition cameras and sensitive microphones in every corner of this house, except the bathrooms. If you put my daughter at risk, if you deviate 1 millimeter from safety protocol, if you bring dust, germs, or disorder into her life, you will be out on the street without a recommendation and without pay. Maya didn't back down. She held the strap of her colorful bag and looked him in the eye. There was a compassion in her gaze that irritated Arthur deeply. She didn't seem afraid of him. She seemed to pity him. Understood, Mr. Vance, she replied, in a calm voice that didn't match the tension of the room. Safety first. But the soul also needs care. A safe house isn't much use if the heart is locked up, is it? Arthur ignored the philosophical comment. The soul couldn't be measured on risk charts. Start now. Her room is the second door on the right, and remember, I am always watching. That night, Arthur didn't work. He sat in his office, surrounded by screens showing every angle of his fortress. The bluish glow of the monitors illuminated his tired face. He selected camera 4, Sophie's room. The protocol was clear. Put her to sleep, check the room temperature, leave quietly. Maya entered the room. She tucked Sophie in, but she didn't leave. She sat on the edge of the bed. Arthur leaned forward in his leather chair. Here comes the mistake, he thought. She's going to get her phone. She's going to fall asleep. But Maya reached into her overall pocket and pulled something out. Arthur zoomed in on the digital image. It was a feather. A long, iridescent peacock feather. What are you up to? Arthur muttered to the screen, suspicion growing like a weed. That could have mites. That could cause a respiratory allergic reaction. He picked up the phone to call the room extension and scream. But he stopped. On the screen, Maya gently brushed the feather across Sophie's arm. The girl, who spent her days rigid as a board waiting for the next impact, shivered. But it wasn't a shiver of fear. She turned her face toward the feather, feeling the air with her small hands. What is that? Sophie's voice came through the surveillance system speakers, low and curious. It's a piece of a bird, Sophie, Maya whispered, brushing the soft texture on the girl's cheek. It's soft, isn't it? The world outside is soft, too. It's not just hard, smooth, and cold like the walls of this house. The world is ticklish. Arthur felt a chill of anger run down his spine. That sentence felt like a direct attack on his architecture of protection. The world is ticklish? No, the world has fire. The world has pain. He should have intervened right then. But a morbid curiosity kept him seated. He wanted to see how far this woman would go. In the days that followed, the surveillance became an addiction. Arthur, the ruthless CEO, became a ghost in his own company. He canceled business lunches, ignored quarterly profit charts, and left partners waiting in the lobby, all to watch a 25-year-old nanny through his iPad screen. He was waiting for the fatal mistake. The next infraction happened on Tuesday, at lunchtime. Arthur's feeding protocol for Sophie was strict and non-negotiable. Soft foods, cut into 0.5 centimeter cubes, served on silicone plates with suction cups to prevent drops. No knives. No mess. No complex textures that could cause choking. On the screen, Arthur saw Maya push the plate of nutritionally balanced beige puree aside. His heart raced. She walked over to the untouchable crystal fruit bowl that served only as decoration in the center of the table and picked up a tangerine. Don't do it, Arthur whispered to the monitor in the middle of a board meeting, ignoring the confused look from his chief financial officer. She doesn't know how to peel it. The acid from the peel will spray. It will get in her eyes. It will sting. She will cry. But Maya didn't peel the fruit. She took Sophie's hand, that tiny, pale hand that rarely touched anything but silk sheets and sterilized metal railings, and placed the whole, bumpy, cold, and imperfect fruit in her palm. It's cold, Sophie's voice echoed in Arthur's Bluetooth headset. And it has little holes? It feels like Grandpa's skin. It's its skin, Maya explained, pulling up a chair and sitting face to face with the girl. Squeeze it, Sophie, close to your ear. Listen to what the fruit has to say. Things talk if you know how to squeeze. Arthur watched, mesmerized and horrified, as Sophie squeezed the fruit hard. A small spray of citrus oil and juice squirted out, staining the immaculate white Egyptian linen tablecloth. Arthur grit his teeth. A stain. Filth. Disorder. Bacteria. But then, he saw Sophie's reaction. The girl didn't cry from the acid. She inhaled deeply, filling her lungs. The citrus scent, strong, sweet, and vibrant, filled the sterile kitchen that always smelled of bleach. Sophie brought her sticky fingers to her nose, and for the first time in 3 years, her shoulders, which were always tensed up near her ears, relaxed. It smells like sunshine, Sophie said, a shy, almost rusty smile appearing on the corner of her lips. Mommy used to make cake with this smell on Sunday mornings. Arthur closed his iPad abruptly, making a loud snap in the silent meeting room. Gentlemen, 10-minute break, he announced, walking out of the room without looking back. He went to the executive bathroom and splashed his face with cold water. He felt a lump in his throat that kept him from swallowing. He had banned any mention of Elena or the past in the house, thinking that cleaning the house of memories would clean away his daughter's pain. But that stranger, with a 50-cent piece of fruit, had brought her mother back. And Sophie was smiling, not crying. Arthur felt a pang of envy so strong it hurt. He provided security, but Maya provided memories. The escalation continued on Thursday in the sunroom. Maya guided Sophie off the paved path. Take off your shoes, Sophie, Maya ordered gently. What? Arthur shouted alone in his office. No, the ground is dirty. There could be glass, bugs, sharp stones. On the screen, Sophie hesitated, holding the hem of her dress. Daddy says I have to wear my orthopedic shoes, to protect my toes. Daddy isn't here, Maya said, and there was a firmness in her voice. Your feet can see too, Sophie. How will you know where you are in the world if you don't feel the ground you walk on? You can't live floating. Slowly, trembling with conditioned fear, Sophie took off her shoes. She placed her bare, pale foot on the cold stone. She shivered. Arthur held his breath, waiting for the scream, the cut, the blood. But Sophie stepped down with her other foot. Maya guided her to a fern and then to a small cactus. Careful, Maya said. This one bites. Touch it slowly. Sophie touched the thorn. Ouch! She pulled her hand back. Arthur stood up. Now. Just cause. She hurt the girl. But Sophie sucked her finger and laughed. It's sharp, like Grandma's needle. The world has thorns, little one, Maya said, wiping the dirt from the girl's foot. If we run away from everything that pokes, we never get to the flower. You have to know where it hurts to know where it's soft. That sentence hit Arthur like a punch to the stomach. He had turned his daughter into a greenhouse flower that never felt the wind, afraid she would lose a petal. He began to doubt his methods, a tiny crack in his armor. But the fear was stronger. Fear whispered, she's lucky. Eventually the luck runs out, and an accident happens. And the guilt will be yours for allowing it. On Friday night, Arthur heard the plan. It's going to rain tomorrow, Sophie, Maya whispered in the dark room. And we're going to bring the rain inside. We're going to make a mess. We're going to paint what we feel. But it's going to get dirty. Very dirty. Do you trust me? I do, said Sophie. But Daddy. Leave Daddy to me. Arthur, hearing everything, felt his blood boil. That was the limit. Planned insubordination. He didn't call. He decided he would go home in the middle of the storm to catch them in the act. He needed to see the filth to justify the firing. He needed to prove he was right. Saturday dawned with a lead-colored sky, heavy and oppressive. black clouds covered the city, turning noon into twilight. Arthur left the office early, driving his sports car through a torrential rain that flooded the streets and turned the asphalt into a river of oil and water. He kept the tablet in the dashboard mount, connected to the cameras, watching the empty living room, waiting for the crime to happen. With every wipe of the windshield, his anger grew. Suddenly, lightning sliced through the sky, a blinding white flash, followed immediately by thunder that made the car chassis vibrate. In the same instant, Arthur's tablet screen flickered, froze, and went black. A red message appeared in the center. No signal. Connection lost. No, no, no! Arthur screamed, slamming the steering wheel. Damned infrastructure! The storm had knocked out the internet or the power at the mansion. He was blind. Big Brother had lost his eyes. What is she doing? Arthur thought, panic rising in his throat like bile. I'm blind. My blind daughter is alone with that crazy woman in an electrical storm. What if the power is out? Sophie is terrified of the dark. No, she lives in the dark. But the noise. The noise. The fear of the unknown took hold of him. He stepped on the gas, taking insane risks on the wet road, cutting off cars, running yellow lights. His mind created disaster scenarios. Sophie falling down the stairs in the dark. Sophie choking. Sophie screaming for him and him not being there. While Arthur raced against time and the rain, inside the mansion, the drama was real and visceral. The crack boom of the thunder that killed the tablet was the trigger. For Sophie, sitting on the living room rug waiting for the game, the sound wasn't just weather. In the darkness of her blindness, her traumatized brain made an immediate and terrifying association. The deafening noise. The smell of ozone from the storm that reminded her of electrical smoke. The vibration in the floor. For Sophie, the fire was happening again. It's burning! Sophie screamed, standing up and knocking over a side chair. Daddy! Fire! Get me out of here! It's hot! She threw herself to the floor, scratching her own face, reliving the trauma. She was no longer in the safe living room. She was in the burning hallway from 3 years ago. Maya, who was in the kitchen bringing the clay, ran into the room. She reached for her pocket by instinct, looking for her phone, and gave up. There was no time. Sophie wasn't there. She was trapped somewhere else, another time. She saw the girl rolling on the floor in a state of complete dissociation. Maya froze for a second. Her mind raced faster than her heart. If this went wrong, she'd be fired, maybe sued, maybe worse. But if she did nothing, that girl would lose herself inside the fire again. Maya knew words weren't enough. Hugs weren't enough. The girl was hallucinating the heat of the fire. She needed an opposite sensory anchor. Fire is hot, light, and stings. She needed something cold, heavy, and wet. Earth. Maya ran to the sunroom. Adrenaline gave her the strength to drag 2 heavy bags of black earth and modeling clay. But Maya wasn't irresponsible. Even in the middle of the chaos, she tried to follow the rules. She grabbed the large black drop cloth she had brought for painting. I'm going to protect Mr. Vance's floor, Maya muttered, her hands shaking, unfolding the plastic over the Persian rug. I can't ruin the rug. She dumped the dirt onto the tarp. She poured the bucket of rainwater. Mud formed. Sophie, it's dirt! Touch here. It's not fire, it's wet dirt. Maya ran, picked up the struggling girl in her arms, and placed her on the tarp. But Sophie was at the height of despair. Feeling the strange texture, she kicked, she rolled, she pushed. In her struggle against the ghosts of the fire, Sophie rolled off the protection of the tarp. She dragged the mud onto the white marble. The muddy water flowed onto the beige rug. The tarp crumpled into a corner, useless. Chaos took over, but it worked. The thermal shock of the cold mud on Sophie's hot skin broke the trance. The weight of the earth on her chest made her feel grounded. The screaming stopped. The crying changed from panic to relief. She began to knead the earth, molding her pain into something physical. It was at that exact moment, with the living room looking like a swamp, the tarp crumpled in the corner, and filth scattered everywhere, that the front door burst open and Arthur entered, soaked and panicking. He didn't see the attempt to protect the floor with the tarp. He didn't see the start of the PTSD crisis. He only saw the filth. And his mind, already weakened by the tense drive, broke. Fury took control. and he kicked Maya out into the rain, as we saw at the beginning. Back to the present, in the silent and ruined room. The door had just slammed behind Maya. Arthur was kneeling beside Sophie, trying to clean her hands with an antibacterial wet wipe he had pulled from his pocket. He rubbed hard, trying to remove every particle of earth, as if the dirt were poison. "It's okay now, sweetheart. Daddy's going to clean everything up. That crazy woman is gone. Let's get you a bath, let's get this dirt off you, and you'll be clean and safe again." Sophie pulled her hand away violently. "You ruined everything," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, small, but it carried the weight of 3 years of silence. Arthur froze. The wipe fell from his hand. Time stopped. He had never heard those words. He expected gratitude. He expected, "Thank you, Daddy, for saving me from the filth." "What? I hate you!" Sophie screamed, lifting her dirty face toward him. "She was saving me." The thunder sounded like fire. "I thought we were going to die again." "The mud was cold, Dad. The mud made the fire stop in my head. I was drawing Mommy." "Drawing? Mommy?" Arthur backed away, sitting on his heels, defeated. He looked at the muddy floor. He tried to see what his daughter saw. He forced his perfectionist eyes to ignore the stain on the rug and focus on the shape. And then, in the middle of the mud spread on the marble, he saw deep strokes. It wasn't a pretty drawing. They were 2 deformed, coarse, primitive mounds of clay. Small fingers had dragged the clay with desperate force. To any visitor, it was a mess. But Sophie called that her mother. Doubt hit him like a physical bolt of lightning. What if I'm wrong? What if my cleanliness is the disease? "I need to see," he whispered. He stood up and ran to the office, slipping on the wet floor of the hall. The router was blinking frantic green lights. The internet signal was back. The security cameras had internal batteries. They had continued recording locally even without transmitting. He needed to see what happened during the blackout. He needed to see the 15 minutes he missed while he was driving blind. He sat in the leather chair, his hands trembling on the mouse. He opened the local file for camera 1. He hit play. The screen showed the clean room. The sound of thunder exploded through the office speakers. Arthur saw Sophie falling to the floor, screaming in absolute terror, pulling her own hair. He saw his own face reflected in his daughter's anguish. "Fire! Fire!" she screamed. Arthur covered his mouth with his hand, holding back a sob. He wasn't there. Then he saw Maya. She didn't run to hide. She didn't call emergency services. She acted, and Arthur saw the tarp. He saw Maya spread the black plastic in a desperate rush, trying to align it with the rug. "I'm going to protect Mr. Vance's floor," he heard her voice on the recording, trembling with fear but focused. "She tried," Arthur whispered, warm tears starting to well up and blur his vision. "She tried to protect the house. She respected the rules even in the middle of hell." He saw Maya put down the dirt. He saw the struggle. And he saw the moment when Sophie, at the peak of her breakdown, kicked the tarp away. Maya didn't care about the mess. She threw herself onto the cold floor, into the mud, dirtying her clothes, her hair, and hugged the mud-covered girl. She chose his daughter's sanity over his rug. She chose love over order. And then, the final audio, seconds before he entered the room. "What is this you made in the mud, Sophie?" Maya asked in the recording, stroking the girl's dirty hair. Sophie tapped the 2 shapeless mounds of clay. "This big one is Mommy, and this little one is me." "I don't remember her face, Maya. My fingers forgot her face. But I remember the hug. The clay is heavy and hugs my hand just like her. Mommy is in the mud." Arthur watched that and broke down. He cried a guttural, ugly, painful cry. The cry of a man who realizes he was the villain of his own story while trying to be the hero. What he saw as filth were the arms of his deceased wife hugging his daughter. What he saw as negligence was the purest and most courageous love. He had kicked out the only person who had brought his family back to life. He looked at the clock on the wall. Maya had left on foot in the storm 25 minutes ago. The bus stop was 1.2 miles away, on a road with no shoulder. If he thought too much, he wouldn't go. If he sat down, he'd rationalize it. If he waited, he'd lose his courage. It was now or never. Arthur didn't call the driver. He didn't grab an umbrella. He didn't change his shoes. He ran out of the office, passed through the mudroom without flinching, opened the front door, and threw himself into the torrential rain. The rain fell mercilessly on the broken glass bus stop on the deserted road. Maya was there, huddled on the metal bench, shivering with cold. She was crying, mixing tears with rainwater, her makeup running, her canvas bag in her lap like a useless shield. A xenon headlight illuminated the dark road. Arthur's sports car appeared around the corner, tires screeching. He braked hard, skidding on the wet asphalt and throwing a fan of dirty water into the air. The driver's door opened. Arthur got out. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His white dress shirt was soaked in seconds, transparent, clinging to his body. He ran toward her, ignoring the puddle of oil and mud. Maya jumped up, startled, ready for more screaming. "Mr. Vance, I'm already going. The bus was late." "Forgive me," Arthur shouted, falling to his knees on the rough, dirty asphalt, ruining his tailored pants for good. He knelt at the feet of the nanny he had humiliated. "Mr. Vance?" Maya backed away, shocked. "I saw the tape. I saw the tarp. I saw the hug." Arthur sobbed, the rain washing his face, mixing with his tears. "I'm an idiot. I'm blind. I thought cleanliness was love. But I locked life outside. I don't know how to be a father to a blind girl, Maya. I only know how to be the manager of her pain. And I'm failing. Will you teach me? Please. Come back." Maya looked at that powerful man, now reduced to a desperate father in the rain. She saw the sincerity. She saw the change. "I don't want triple the salary, Arthur," she said, her voice firm, holding out her dirty hand to him. "I only come back if I have permission to make a mess. A big mess." Arthur looked at her hand. It had paint on it. It had dirt on it. It had humanity. He gripped her hand tightly. "The house is yours," he said, standing up. "Break everything, dirty everything. Just bring her smile back." The camera pans through the living room of the Vance mansion. The transformation is total. The Persian rug is gone. In its place is a colorful, soft, and washable mat. The white walls now display tactile paintings made of twigs, dried clay, and thick paint. Arthur is sitting on the floor in old jeans and a t-shirt stained with green paint. He is blindfolded with a scarf. Sophie, radiant, guides her father's hand over a strange and rough sculpture. "What is it, Dad?" Arthur feels it. "Is it a dinosaur?" "No, Dad, it's you. It's the day you knelt in the rain." Sophie laughs, throwing her head back. It's Elena's laugh. The house is full of sound. Maya is in a corner, painting a canvas, watching the two of them with a smile of a job well done. The house is no longer perfect. There is dust in the corners. There is paint on the baseboards. The grass outside is tall. But it is a living home. Arthur learned the hard way that we cannot protect those we love by isolating them from the world. Life is messy, it is chaotic, but it is in the mud that flowers grow. He spent millions building a glass fortress. But it was a simple nanny, armed only with mud and compassion, who saved his family from the coldness. Sometimes the greatest proof of love isn't clearing the path, but getting dirty together. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone you love. Kindness is free, but it is worth everything.